In today's episode, we explore the dark story of a well-respected doctor's hidden romantic relationships that spiraled into obsession and, eventually, murder. Dr. Jeff Kane, 54, was a renowned sports injury expert in Scottsdale, Arizona, but his private life took a dangerous turn when he became involved with 3 younger men. Dr. Kane ran a highly successful practice, serving many well-known athletes, particularly from local high school and college sports teams. With his confident charm, he was a familiar face on local TV segments, offering tips on preventing injuries. Living in an affluent Scottsdale neighborhood, Dr. Kane seemed to have everything: money, respect, and a flourishing career. By the age of 17, Clarissa felt utterly adrift. It was during this time that her mother urged her to start therapy. Out of desperation, they turned to Dr. Ralph Langford, a therapist in Hillsborough who specialized in helping teens and young adults. Dr. Langford had a solid reputation, instilling hope in Clarissa that she could escape the painful patterns of her past. Initially, therapy appeared to be beneficial. He provided the support and compassion she had been yearning for. During their sessions, Clarissa felt safe enough to share her deepest struggles without fear of judgment. However, as time went on, the nature of their sessions began to shift. Dr. Langford introduced what he referred to as intimate healing techniques, steering their therapy into more personal territory. He framed these interactions as opportunities for Clarissa to explore trust, intimacy, and self-worth. However, rather than offering real support, the sessions became a way for him to manipulate her into a secret sexual relationship, leaving Clarissa feeling confused and isolated. She began to think this might be a distorted form of healing. Yet deep down, she felt trapped and unsure. Just days before her death, Clarissa learned she was pregnant, a revelation that left her utterly overwhelmed. Clarissa was uncertain about how Dr. Langford would react or what this pregnancy would mean for her future. Recently, she had started working at a local Jamba Juice to make ends meet, struggling to afford the basics. The idea of becoming a mother at 19 felt overwhelming, but the thought of having a family, something safe and her own, offered her a glimmer of hope. She imagined what her life could be like if Dr. Langford were supportive. However, when she shared the news, his indifferent reaction left her feeling abandoned and more vulnerable than ever. In her final days, Clarissa held onto the hope that somehow things might still work out. Though young and unsure, the pregnancy sparked dreams within her. Tragically, she would never have the chance to explore those possibilities, as her future was abruptly cut short. Her struggles and hopes were silenced forever. On the morning of June 4, 2015, residents of Hillsborough were stunned by a horrific discovery. At around 7:30 a.m., a delivery driver named Dave Garcia, on his usual route, spotted something out of the ordinary in the alley behind a Jiffy Lube. The Jiffy Lube, located just off Main Street, was a spot Dave passed every day, typically quiet in the early morning. However, on that day, he saw a motionless figure on the ground near some dumpsters. Initially, he thought it might be a homeless person asleep or someone who had fallen and was injured. When he got closer, the terrible truth became clear. The young woman's body was bruised and bloodied, her clothing torn and stained. She lay in an unnatural position, with signs of a brutal struggle evident on the ground around her. Dave realized this was no accident. Trying to remain composed, he quickly called 911, his voice trembling as he described the grim scene. The dispatchers worked to reassure him as he awaited assistance, but the shock of witnessing such violence was evident in his demeanor. Within minutes, police arrived at the scene. Officers from the Hillsborough Police Department secured the area and began searching the alley for evidence. They quickly identified the young woman as Clarissa Bruce, recognizing her from social media and recent local events. Clarissa was a familiar face in the area, having worked at a local coffee shop. As the police examined the crime scene, they noted several blunt force injuries on her body, indicating she had been the victim of a brutal and violent attack. Blood spattered nearby walls and a trash bin, indicating that the struggle had been intense. Small items like an earring and a broken bracelet were scattered near her body, further evidence of a desperate fight. Police noted the position of her hands, which had abrasions, showing she had tried to protect herself from the blows. Investigators cordoned off the area and began gathering evidence, meticulously marking each piece. Detectives wearing gloves used tweezers to collect fibers, swabs for potential DNA, and took photographs of every detail. They knew that the quiet town of Hillsborough hadn't experienced a crime of this magnitude in years, making the situation particularly disturbing for both residents and law enforcement. By midday, news had spread throughout Hillsborough, and reporters from local stations like K2 and the Oregonian gathered at the scene. The discovery of Clarissa's body, a young woman with her life ahead of her, left the community shaken and seeking answers. The tight-knit town would never be the same after that day. The Hillsborough police took swift, deliberate action to investigate the crime scene where 19-year-old Clarissa Bruce was found. Detective Sarah Nolan and her team worked methodically, cataloging evidence in the Jiffy Lube alley. They found clear signs of a struggle: scattered jewelry, blood on the walls, and deep bruises on Clarissa's arms and face. Initially, police suspected she might have been sexually assaulted due to the condition of her clothes, but an autopsy quickly clarified that this was not the case. Instead, the medical report revealed two significant findings: Clarissa was 2 months pregnant, and traces of both marijuana and alcohol were present in her system. These discoveries added complexity to the investigation. Hillsborough police suspected that Clarissa's troubled personal life may have played a role in the tragedy. She had endured years of hardship, particularly with her stepfather, who was known for his violent outbursts. Detective Nolan pointed out that Clarissa had previously reported instances of abuse to authorities, but those cases had been closed due to insufficient evidence. This background put her family, particularly her stepfather, high on the suspect list. However, that theory quickly fell apart when police verified that Clarissa's mother and stepfather were hundreds of miles away at the time of her death. Phone and transaction records showed they were on a family trip to Disneyland in Anaheim, California, enjoying a vacation that had been planned months in advance. Photos and video footage from Disneyland's security cameras confirmed that Clarissa's mother and stepfather were together on the day of her death, providing them with a solid alibi. However, detectives found it strange that the family was on vacation while their daughter appeared to be grappling with substance use and an unplanned pregnancy. This unsettling information, along with the exclusion of her parents as suspects, shifted the focus of the investigation. Meanwhile, detectives were troubled by the circumstances of Clarissa's pregnancy. In interviews with her friends and co-workers at the local Jamba Juice, they discovered that she had recently confided in a few of them about a secret relationship. However, she was cautious about revealing details, only mentioning that the father of her unborn child was older and not part of her immediate social circle. The substances found in her system prompted detectives to consider that Clarissa may have been involved with someone who either enabled or shared her struggles with substance use. They began to investigate her social life more closely, aiming to identify potential suspects who had been in contact with her in the weeks leading up to her death. With scant evidence left at the scene beyond blood splatter and scattered belongings, Detective Nolan's team focused on Clarissa's personal connections, hoping each clue would bring them closer to the truth. Dr. Ralph Langford, 52, was a well-respected therapist in Hillsborough, Oregon, recognized for his commitment to the mental health of young people. Over the years, he had built a strong reputation as a compassionate and effective counselor for troubled teens and young adults, often praised for his ability to connect with clients who had difficulty in traditional settings. He received several accolades for his work, including an Outstanding Service Award from the Hillsborough Mental Health Alliance in 2012 and a Community Champion Award in 2014. Behind this respected facade, though, was a darker side to Dr. Langford's therapy. Police learned that Langford had crossed professional boundaries with Clarissa Bruce, turning their sessions into something far from ethical counseling. Under the guise of intimate healing techniques, which were really just sex acts, he had engaged in a sexual relationship with the 19-year-old. He presented these encounters as vital steps in her emotional recovery, exploiting her vulnerabilities and convincing her that what he termed intimate healing was essential to overcoming her trauma. Langford assured Clarissa that their relationship was not only necessary for her progress, but also a unique bond. This manipulation left her believing she needed his help, fostering a dependence on his sessions and placing her in an extremely vulnerable position. When police called Langford in for questioning, he initially appeared calm, using his composed demeanor to try to maintain control of the situation. He confidently claimed that his methods were unconventional but designed to build trust. However, when detectives confronted him with details about his physical relationship with Clarissa, his calm demeanor started to falter. The officers asked pointed questions about the intimate healing techniques he had used, challenging him on the ethics of his sexual relationship with a young, vulnerable patient. Langford grew visibly uneasy, his usual composure slipping as the gravity of the situation set in. He initially denied any wrongdoing, framing their relationship as consensual and claiming it was for Clarissa's benefit. However, investigators remained skeptical. The detectives presented Langford with text messages he had sent to Clarissa, which were clearly inappropriate and explicitly romantic. As they pressed further, his responses turned defensive. He insisted that his work had been misunderstood and maintained that he had only acted as a guide to aid Clarissa in her recovery. However, the evidence told a different story. Detectives observed Langford's transformation from calm and composed to visibly anxious and defensive as they pointed out the power imbalance in his relationship with Clarissa. They questioned him about the professional and legal violations inherent in their encounters, stressing the harm inflicted on a young woman already grappling with trauma. Langford, who had built his career on credibility, now faced the unsettling reality that his actions could soon be fully revealed. Elise Chan Langford, 29, was known in Hillsborough as a sharp and determined businesswoman who operated a successful chain of nail salons in the Portland area. Above all, Elise was fiercely loyal to her husband, Dr. Ralph Langford, a loyalty that drove her to protect his reputation at any cost. Their relationship began nearly a decade earlier when Elise, a struggling college student reeling from her father's suicide, sought therapy. She turned to Dr. Langford, who quickly became more than just a counselor. As their professional relationship blurred into something sexual, Elise found herself falling in love with the man who had once guided her through her darkest times. Elise firmly believed that Dr. Langford had saved her from a dark time and felt a deep sense of indebtedness to him. Despite their complicated start, she had always seen herself as his one true partner. However, over the years, her faith in him began to waver. She couldn't ignore the red flags indicating that Ralph might be crossing sexual boundaries with other clients, just as he had with her. Elise's suspicions evolved into intense paranoia, making her increasingly anxious about the possibility that he was involved with his young patients. This fear gnawed at her, leaving her constantly on edge and desperate to either confirm or dispel her concerns. Her marriage had spiraled into a cycle of worry and resentment, as her loyalty to Ralph conflicted with her feelings of betrayal. When police arrived to question Elise, she had no idea how close her worst fears were to becoming reality. Detectives presented her with evidence linking Ralph to 19-year-old Clarissa Bruce, including messages and call records exchanged between them. At first, Elise managed to stay composed, holding on to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. However, as the evidence mounted, her calm facade began to break. The realization that Ralph had exploited Clarissa, just as he had once exploited her, struck her with overwhelming force. At first, Elise managed to stay composed, holding on to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. However, as the evidence mounted, her calm facade began to break. The realization that Ralph had exploited Clarissa, just as he had once exploited her, struck her with overwhelming force. Elise, who had spent years convincing herself of Ralph's dedication to their marriage, was now faced with the painful possibility that he might have lied to her all along. In those tense moments, her loyalty began to waver as she recognized that her fears had been justified. Her trust lay in ruins. Elise grappled with the depth of Ralph's betrayal, questioning whether it was enough to drive someone to murder. As police continued their investigation, a major twist emerged that would change everything. Initially, investigators had zeroed in on Dr. Ralph Langford as the prime suspect in Clarissa Bruce's case due to his troubling relationship with her. However, a closer examination of Elise Chan Langford's digital records revealed a series of messages that hinted at something more sinister. Despite her unwavering loyalty to Ralph, Elise appeared to have been aware of Clarissa's relationship with her husband and had even confronted Clarissa about it. This discovery painted a drastically different picture of the case. The texts unveiled a heated exchange in which Elise warned Clarissa to stay away from Ralph. Her messages reflected a deep resentment toward the young woman, using harsh language to accuse Clarissa of ruining families. Investigators now had reason to believe that Elise might have played a much larger role in the events leading to Clarissa's death than previously suspected. This new evidence prompted detectives to view Elise as a potential suspect rather than merely a concerned wife. They now faced a case where jealousy, anger, and betrayal could have driven her to take drastic action. Friends of Elise described her as increasingly tense in the days leading up to Clarissa's death, with some even noting her erratic behavior. Investigators began to piece together a timeline indicating that Elise had access to Clarissa's whereabouts and could have easily arranged to confront her alone. This twist complicated the investigation, shifting focus from Ralph to Elise as they sought to determine whether her jealousy had driven her to take matters into her own hands. What had initially appeared to be a straightforward case of a therapist's unethical behavior now evolved into a complex web of deceit, with Elise's motivations adding a new layer to the mystery. As the investigation progressed, police found themselves grappling with more questions than answers. They intensified their search for additional evidence, scrutinizing Elise's activities and contacting those close to her. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of the unfolding twist, with local news stations and even the Oregonian newspaper running articles speculating on the case's potential outcome. As police delved deeper into Clarissa's life and relationships, they identified yet another suspect, Kyle Langford, Ralph Langford's nephew. Interviews with Clarissa's friends and classmates revealed that Kyle had developed a troubling obsession with her. At 17, he was seen as somewhat of an outsider, known for his unpredictable temper and struggles to fit in. But Clarissa's quiet strength and kindness had drawn him in. Friends revealed that Kyle often confided in her, viewing her as the only person who understood him and offered him attention. Investigators uncovered a series of text messages that underscored Kyle's fixation on Clarissa. He would send Clarissa lengthy messages late at night, oscillating between praising her and expressing anger when she didn't respond promptly. Kyle's texts often contained confessions of deep feelings, indicating he believed they shared a unique bond. His messages also hinted at jealousy, particularly after he discovered her secret relationship with his uncle. Friends noted that Kyle became increasingly withdrawn and sullen after hearing rumors about Clarissa's involvement with Ralph, expressing anger and confusion over why she would choose someone else over him. He started spending more time alone, obsessively monitoring her social media and even showing up at places he knew she frequented, like local coffee shops and shops around Hillsborough. When police finally confronted Kyle, they observed that he grew visibly uncomfortable. Detectives presented Kyle with a series of messages he had sent to Clarissa, pressing him on his anger and possessiveness. Initially, he tried to downplay his obsession, nervously insisting that he simply cared about her and wanted to ensure she was okay. However, as the questioning persisted, he grew defensive, claiming he had no idea why everyone was making such a big deal about his relationship with Clarissa. His unease deepened when detectives probed his whereabouts on the night of her death. Kyle's responses became evasive, his tone shifting between frustration and fear as he insisted he had been nowhere near the scene. Detectives could not overlook the intensity of Kyle's fixation on Clarissa, raising further suspicions about his involvement. His behavior fit a troubling pattern, suggesting a young man who felt rejected and betrayed by the girl he had idolized. Kyle's social media accounts further illustrated his obsession, featuring posts and photos dedicated to Clarissa, often accompanied by desperate captions. While police weren't prepared to make any arrests, they flagged Kyle as a person of interest, aware that his feelings for Clarissa might have escalated into something dangerous. With new evidence accumulating against multiple suspects, the investigation shifted to connecting the pieces that could uncover the truth behind Clarissa's tragic death. As the police inquiry neared its conclusion, the evidence increasingly pointed to one chilling realization: Dr. Ralph Langford, Clarissa's therapist and secret lover, was responsible for her death. Clarissa had confided to Langford that she was pregnant with his child, a revelation that threw him into panic. Known in his community for his exemplary reputation and numerous awards, Dr. Langford had always been careful to keep his private life hidden. News of an affair with a teen patient, especially one that had led to pregnancy, threatened to unravel the carefully crafted life he'd built. According to police reports, when Dr. Langford learned of the pregnancy, he became desperate. In a private therapy session, he allegedly pressured Clarissa to terminate it, warning her that having a child would ruin both their lives. However, Clarissa refused, expressing her hopes of keeping the baby and raising it on her own. Faced with rejection, Langford felt cornered. police theorized that, in a desperate attempt to preserve his reputation and avoid potential legal consequences, he resorted to violence. On June 3, 2015, investigators believed Dr. Langford lured Clarissa to a secluded area, claiming he wanted to help her clear her mind. Accounts suggest he masked his growing rage and guilt, convincing himself that this was the only way to protect everything he had built. But during the confrontation, his composure slipped. When Clarissa stood firm in her decision, Langford reportedly lost control, killing her in a sudden, brutal outburst. He later attempted to cover his tracks, staging the scene to look like an accident. The turning point came when police uncovered text messages between Langford and Clarissa, revealing his desperate pleas to keep their affair secret. Surveillance footage later confirmed his presence at the crime scene, showing his car parked nearby. When officers arrested Dr. Langford at his home, he initially maintained a calm facade, attempting to deny any involvement in her death. But as investigators presented the evidence, his calm demeanor began to unravel. He seemed overwhelmed, offering vague statements that betrayed his guilt. Meanwhile, Elise Langford, his devoted wife, was devastated by the revelations. Known for defending her husband's reputation at every turn, Elise was heartbroken and humiliated by his actions. The woman who had once stood by him now faced deep betrayal, her loyalty twisted against her in the most painful way. With the evidence firmly established, Dr. Langford was charged with Clarissa's murder, leaving the community in shock and a family shattered. The investigation into the circumstances of Clarissa's tragic end provided some answers, but left an indelible scar on all involved. The trial of Dr. Ralph Langford began in March 2016, drawing significant media attention. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, and reporters eager to hear the details of this shocking case. Prosecutor Sarah Jenkins and defense attorney Malloy Henson faced off, presenting their arguments to the jury. Jenkins portrayed Langford as a manipulative predator who exploited his position of trust, while Henson contended that the evidence was circumstantial and questioned the integrity of the police investigation. As the trial progressed, mounting evidence against Dr. Langford included incriminating text messages and surveillance footage. It seemed clear that Langford had both motive and opportunity to kill Clarissa. However, just as the prosecution felt confident in their case, something utterly unexpected occurred. During a heated moment in the trial, Elise Langford, Ralph's wife, suddenly leaped from her seat and rushed toward the microphone in the courtroom. Her voice rang out loud and clear. "I'm the real killer." The courtroom fell silent, stunned by her dramatic confession. Elise claimed she had been the one to murder Clarissa, alleging that she had caught her husband in a compromising situation with the young woman. This shocking confession turned the trial on its head. However, law enforcement officials and the prosecution remained skeptical of Elise's claim, viewing it as a desperate attempt to shield her husband from a lengthy prison sentence. After all, there was no evidence linking Elise to the crime, and her story contradicted the extensive evidence against Dr. Langford. The judge swiftly called for order, and Elise was escorted from the courtroom, her emotional breakdown leaving a haunting atmosphere in the air. As the trial continued, the jury deliberated for several days before returning with a verdict. Dr. Ralph Langford was found guilty of second-degree murder. The sentencing followed soon after, resulting in a lengthy prison term. Langford sat in silence, his expression unreadable, though those who knew him noted a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. The man who once held a respected position in the community was now a convicted murderer. For Elise, the outcome was bittersweet. While her husband faced the consequences of his actions, she was left grappling with a profound sense of loss and betrayal. The shocking events of the trial and Elise's desperate outburst left her with more questions than answers. In the years that followed, the lives of those involved took dramatic turns. Langford was sentenced to 25 years to life in a maximum security facility, where he spent his days reflecting on the consequences of his actions. Once a respected therapist, Langford became notorious among inmates for his manipulative behavior. His reputation didn't earn him any allies behind bars. In fact, he often faced hostility from others who learned about his crimes. His dramatic fall from grace served as a stark reminder of how quickly one's life can unravel due to poor choices. Elise Langford faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life in the wake of the trial. The revelations about her husband had shattered her trust, forcing her to confront painful truths. In the months that followed, she sought therapy to process her trauma and betrayal, gradually working to reclaim her sense of self. Through counseling, Elise began to explore her identity beyond her marriage, striving to find hope and healing in a new chapter of her life. In the years that followed, Elise and Kyle forged a bond rooted in their shared experiences of trauma and loss. Their connection deepened as they navigated their respective journeys toward healing. By 2018, they chose to marry in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. Their union symbolized not only a new beginning but also a commitment to supporting each other as they moved forward from the shadows of their pasts. The couple welcomed 3 children in the following years, embracing the joys of family life. They often took outings to local zoos and parks, cherishing the opportunity to create happy memories together. Inspired by their past challenges, Kyle pursued a career as a therapist, determined to make a positive impact in the lives of others. He aimed to ensure that the mistakes of his uncle were not repeated, using his experiences to guide and support his young clients. Kyle's dedication to his profession earned him recognition in the community. He became known for his compassionate approach to therapy, providing much-needed support to troubled teens and young adults. His own journey of healing fueled his passion, allowing him to connect with his clients on a deeper level. Many praised him for his understanding and commitment, viewing him as a beacon of hope for those grappling with their struggles. Elise found a new purpose in community outreach, focusing on mental health awareness and support for victims of abuse. She shared her story to raise awareness, emphasizing the importance of seeking help and speaking out against abuse. Her efforts resonated with many, empowering individuals to confront their challenges and advocate for themselves. Through her advocacy, Elise not only honored Clarissa's memory, but also transformed her own pain into a source of strength for others. Their diverging paths illustrated the profound impact of choices. Ralph, imprisoned for his crimes, became a cautionary tale of betrayal and moral failure. Elise, embracing her role as an advocate, worked tirelessly to help others heal, finding strength in vulnerability. Meanwhile, Kyle, now a compassionate therapist, dedicated his life to supporting troubled youth, drawing from his own painful experiences. Each of them, shaped by their past, served as a reminder that every decision can ripple through lives in unexpected ways, creating a complex tapestry of consequence, healing, and hope.